Good morning. Thank you for coming to this workshop. It is truly my great pleasure to introduce our two speakers this morning. They are both members of the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas, and they are on the Mercy Workshop on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, which was formed in response to a chapter mandate in 2017. As a former member of a very traditional religious community, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to be in a community where there is little understanding, acknowledgement, or acceptance of different sexual orientations. And so I congratulate the Sisters of Mercy for their commitment to openly studying the role that sexual orientation and gender identity plays in their members and in their community and in their ministry. Truly a wonderful step forward. So without further ado, let me present our speakers. Elizabeth Betsy Linehan chairs the work group. Prior to her retirement from St. Joseph's University, Philadelphia in 2019, she co-chaired the Alliance on campus for about 20 years. For that work, she received the Deo Gratias Award from Dignity Philadelphia. Betsy's professional field is philosophy, in which she holds a PhD awarded by Fordham University in 1976. Karen Scheer's professional degree is in medicine, an MD from George Washington University. She is a board-certified family medicine physician, currently providing primary care for persons who are homebound. She also serves as an institute minister for the Sisters of Mercy. So let's give them a warm dignity welcome.
I'm Betsy. This is Karen. I just want to say I'm delighted to be here. The details you just heard we're going to give you, but you don't need them now. So I just want to say that I'm really privileged to be able to be here and talk to you about the Sisters of Mercy's very unfinished work. Start with that as your understanding of what we're talking about.
And I add my thanks, and I'm very happy to be here. And before we start, I just want to say a little bit about the Sisters of Mercy. So we're an international community founded by Catherine Macaulay in 1831 in Dublin, Ireland. We have approximately 2,200 members in 12 countries and Guam. And our ministries have been primarily in education, healthcare, social and spiritual services, and more recently, we have been focused since 2005 on what we have named our critical concerns. They include anti-racism, nonviolence, birth, women, and immigration. And we have been endeavoring since 2005 to do justice and effect systemic change both internally and externally. First, some history. How did we get to this stage? So, in June of 2015, a parent caught wind that one of our employees, a beloved directress of religious education at one of our sponsored grade schools, was married to a woman. Under pressure from some parents and the possibility of a negative action by the Archbishop of Philadelphia, the board at the school decided not to renew her contract, in essence firing her. She was a long-time Mercy employee who was highly involved not only in the life of the school, but in the life of the community. And in fact, many Sisters of Mercy count her as friends, and in fact, I have been a friend of hers for almost 40 years. There was a huge fallout. It divided the Sisters of Mercy in Philadelphia, it divided the school community, it divided the local community. In response, a group of Sisters of Mercy, including Betsy and myself, as well as Mercy associates, teachers, and parents from the school, formed a support and prayer group for this employee and her partner. We spent a lot of time processing grieving and railing against the injustice, and trying to engage in dialogue with others to address what happened and somehow fix it. However, we did not make the progress we desired and decided we needed to engage the Sisters of Mercy in a broader and more global manner. Our self-named group, DAWN, which stands for Diversity, All Are Welcome Now, began discussing how we could engage the greater community. We decided that the best option would be to raise this at Chapter. Chapter in any religious community is a meeting, differs in timing, but for us it's every 6 years, and when in session, it's the highest authority of the religious community. It is where we set our direction for our mission for the future 6 years, and we elect our leadership team. We discerned that the best way to be heard and to change hearts and minds would be through story. So each member of the DAWN group, which was about 15 members or so, wrote a reflection and reflected how what happened to our friend, how it impacted us individually and as a community. A couple months before the chapter, we sent the collection of essays in a booklet to the entire chapter body, which numbered about 300 sisters, along with a letter and an explanation of the work we had been doing since June of 2015, and our desire to continue the conversation and discern a way of moving forward. Our 2017 chapter discernment question asked God to help us envision a way to deepen our transformation towards greater integrity of word and deed. We invited all to join us on the evening of June 27th as we endeavored to see where the God of mercy, wisdom, and mystery was inviting us to dare, to risk, and to speak on behalf of our LGBTQ siblings. Betsy and I were delegates, and we shuffled off to Buffalo. Not as nice as San Diego, let me tell you. So chapter events. Consensus is never easy. So what happened at chapter is, we could not get onto the official chapter agenda. So we had an evening meeting. And we invited anybody who was concerned about LGBTQ justice to come for the conversation. We expected maybe 50 people. I made some prayer sheets for about 60. We set similar kind of a ballroom, little circle in the middle of the ballroom, opened up the doors at the appointed hour, and about 250 people came in. Right. We were overcome. And two things happened. First, every person in that room practically shared a story about an LGBTQ person that they love and who was being discriminated against and excluded, and how that affected them and their loved ones. And then we started thinking about what we could do to change. The conversation, however, of the evening bubbled up into the main chapter session, and an official call was to incorporate language of solidarity with our LGBTQ community. However, several sisters, as Nancy said, tough road to haul, were not ready for that. They wanted members, they didn't think members would be able to support such a move because of their own ignorance about this reality. So a motion came up on the floor that we would charge the soon-to-be elected leadership team to establish a mechanism by which the community would engage in education and dialogue around sexual orientation and gender identity. The motion was seconded and affirmed by the chapter body and made part of our recommitment statement. It's a big, long statement, but there's a particular part that we were charged with. And this is the call. We hear the cry of our suffering world, the impoverishment of peoples, the devastation of earth, the oppressive social norms and systems call us in this moment to act, to become better educated, and to participate in engaged dialogue on gender identity and sexual orientation.
A couple of editorial comments. One is the reason that some sisters resisted taking a larger or more daring action on this was not just ignorance, it was fear of the church, risk of church conflict, which is understandable. We'll talk more about that. And the other thing I would say is the chapter body's authority is an important point because the leadership group that we elected were very supportive of this effort. But if they didn't have the support of the official governance body, then they're out there on a limb all by themselves if there's controversy, which there inevitably will be. So that was very important. So the leadership team appointed the work group, which means they asked particular people to be on for other people. Each person they asked said yes right away, which is indicative. Karen is one, Mary Kay Dobrowski, a Sister of Mercy, Jen Barrow, a Sister of Mercy, and Mary Hunt, who many of you know and who I have been very privileged to get to know through this experience. So the charge of the work group was to create an institute-wide process for education and engaged dialogue with focus on the vowed members of the community. You have to start with a core group. There's lots of other audiences that we care about. It was important that the processes designed draw on experience as well as theology, psychology, spirituality, etc. And in addition to inviting the whole community to engage, our mandate also targeted the need for safe spaces for particular groups of members, especially sisters who identify as lesbian or bisexual. And one of my great learnings from this work has been how difficult life has been for many of our sisters within the community. We also aimed to provide resources for those who want to think and reflect more deeply, film, readings, slides, etc. So, first step was to ask the chapters, since they're the ones who authorized all this, what do they need and what do they want? Where should we start? And the answers we got, we did a written poll. Answers we got included conversations about sexuality itself, recognizing that not everybody's comfortable with the topic. We wanted to have experience, real world stories would be most helpful. We need to realize that we're not at the same place, not starting at the same place. That it's easier for sisters to offer personal support to sisters and ministry partners, as Karen just described in Philadelphia, than to take public stances and risk conflict with church officials. And they also said they needed us to clarify, or somebody to clarify, what the church does and does not teach on these matters. And I want to provide another editorial comment. That's very important because some of the things the bishops say are not what the church teaches.
And so we started. The work group took some time to get to know one another, to meet, and to organize ourselves and to share our initial thoughts and personal starting points around our knowledge and experience of the LGBTQ human reality. Before long, we decided that we needed a facilitator for all our meetings so Betsy could participate fully in all the discussions. And we have been very fortunate over the time of going on 5 years that we've had 2 wonderful facilitators.
So our starting point from having programming was kind of not what I expected or what a lot of people in the community expected. We started with the question, what does sexuality have to do anyway with being celibate religious? And some people in the community thought, that's a tough question, we already know the answer, but a lot of people thought the answer was nothing. And so that was the starting point. And part of the reason people had various answers about a lot, nothing, this and that, was the differences in when we went through formation processes and who were the people in charge of our formation and what was the ideology at that time. So, of course, others would say, what does sexuality have to do with celibate religious? It has everything. So
we started our first education event in February of 2019 and invited Dr. Lynn Levo, who is a psychologist and a sister of St. Joseph of Condolet. And the program was entitled Being Sexual and Celibate. This was a most important beginning because Many of us who were members were brought up in a church to believe that anything related to the body was bad and had the potential to be the occasion of sin. Sisters learned when they entered the convent to check their sexuality at the door. And so what Lynn helped us to do was normalize the conversation about sexuality, develop some common language around the spectrum of sexual orientation and gender identity, which exists, and confirm that nuns had both, and it is good. And in fact, it is at the heart of our energy and of our being and our passion for God and realizing God's kingdom in the here and now. The session was recorded, as all of our sessions were, so that members who could not attend in person could view it. And we gave them a process and encouraged people to engage. After getting some common language about Soju, we embarked on the second education event in September of 2019, which we named Faithful Perspectives on Sexual Orientation. We decided on this title to reinforce the reality that persons of diverse sexual orientation are faithful and faith-filled members of our church and community. We first started with story and heard from a panel of Mercy family members, including a lesbian sister, a companion in Mercy whose daughter and granddaughter identified as lesbian, and a married lesbian couple who were part of our Mercy Volunteer Corps. They each shared their story around sexual orientation, how relationships and their life with family, colleagues, Mercy, and church evolved. This was followed by a short presentation and discussions around sexual orientation from sociologic, philosophic, theological perspectives. Again, it was very well received and very rich, and unfortunately, at that point, the pandemic hit. So that was our very last session that we could have in person together, but we continued via, as everyone has on Zoom.
Well, even though we regretted having to go on Zoom, it had some advantages, including the fact that we have sisters in Guam and the Philippines, and they can participate without flying to wherever. And at one point we had a speaker from Dublin, Ireland, so it wasn't all bad. In fact, we had probably more people attending overall because of that. So in October 2020, we offered a program called Gender Identity and Mercy Love in 3 sessions over a day and a half. Dr. Erin Cross, who is the director at the University of Pennsylvania's LGBTQ Center, introduced the complex realities of gender identity and facilitated a shared reflection on small and large groups. And yes, we all have gender identities. That was part of the realization that was supposed to take place, that I think did. And then we had Dr. Erin Swenson, ordained as a Presbyterian minister when she was a man, and then still a Presbyterian minister after she transitioned to being a woman, which was revolutionary in her denomination. And she facilitated, she guided us through historical, theological, social understandings of gender identity, on which she is an expert, because now she is practicing psychotherapist with people particularly working with gender identity. And so she drew extensively on her experience as a trans woman and on her present experience as a marriage and family therapist. She's in Atlanta, so I recommend her to you if you ever have any use for that kind of consultation. Then we engaged with 4 panelists who identify as transgender or gender non-binary persons. And they shared their journeys, their personal journeys of discovering and living into their gender identities. Erin Swenson got them for us, from people that she personally knew. And she facilitated what turned out to be a very rich discussion. And one of the things that I feel best about that discussion was that the sisters in attendance, who knew less about gender identity than about sexual orientation, were so receptive, appreciative, and even affectionate. I think they started to make them honorary sisters of mercy, which is but anyway, it was very moving and I think very successful.
So circling back to our the mandate that we received from chapter, One of the other charges that we had was to provide safe spaces for members who identify, for our own membership and others who are in our Mercy family. So the SOGI work group hosted a retreat-like in-person weekend in February 2019. This was pre-COVID, for about 30 persons. We called this, in subsequent sessions, Every Life Cherished and Celebrated. And I have to tell a little story aside, but this was a title that was used by the Philadelphia Archdiocese for welcoming persons into the church. You know, everyone's celebrated and cherished, but not all people. So I co-opted this title from the Philadelphia Church.
Did you get permission?
Yeah, I didn't get permission. Anyway, so we had that gathering, which was wonderful, and it was a great connection for folks. And we had several virtual gatherings since then. And most recently, we had a prayer and a ritual celebrating our 4 Sister of Mercy authors who recently published the collection of essays, Love Tenderly. So again, another part of our charge is to provide resources, and everything that we've done is on our webpage. And so there's all the education events, links to Mercy writings related to SOGI, and resources for further study. So after 2 years of doing this, we thought, well, we got to take a little step back and see how we're doing. And we wanted to get some sense of how our understanding of sexual orientation, gender identity might have shifted and grown within the community. So we conducted a survey in which we had 809 complete responses, which is about 35.7% of the community. Nearly 3/4 of the respondents are between 65 and 84, with the most respondents in our younger generations, and 85 and older were a bit underrepresented. And the responses came from all countries of our institute, including, we have many countries in South and Central America, Caribbean, and Guam and the Philippines. Almost 2/3 of our respondents either have a family member, good friend, or close colleague who identifies as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer. Pure respondents, about 16%, are or know of a family member who identifies as transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. Clear messages, though, that we got from the community was that they appreciated the work we were doing and wanted us to continue it. And the majority believe that LGBTQ persons are made in the image and likeness of God and not intrinsically disordered, and that sexual orientation and partner relationships have no bearing on fitness and ministry roles in Catholic organizations.
The answers became more complex, though, the closer they came to our concrete realities. So, for example, 67% think maintaining Catholic identity of Mercy schools, hospitals, and other ministries is essential. That was even more strongly affirmed in Guam and the Philippines. 94% believe these Mercy ministries, on the other hand, should never discriminate against those we serve on the basis of LGBTQ identity. 75% would stand up individually, and 80% believe that Mercy should stand up publicly in support of LGBTQ plus persons. So you can see that there's a tension built into these responses. This does not surprise us, but it certainly presents a challenge. A couple other significant observations from the survey. First, the obvious question, how many members participated directly by being present at the time or indirectly by viewing the video in at least one educational event? Well, it looks like only 1/3 or so of all members. I don't think that captures the extent of our influence or of people's conversation, though, but 1/3 is not 3/3, and we know that. Is that there are many things we need to do more work on, but one big one is heterosexism as a pervasive assumption. There's a disconnect between what sisters think that means and how that shapes their beliefs about LGBTQ personhood. So, as illustrated by the heterosexism comment I just made, there's a lot determine where we go from here, and we will report and all that. So we need to address the clear call from the community to deepen our understanding of what the church teaches in this area. In the fall of 2021, we offered 2 Zoom programs under the heading of Catholic Church Teaching, Conscience, and Sensus Fidei. The first, in October 2021, Sister Helen Burns provided what she called a 30,000-foot view of the development of Catholic moral teaching and facilitated serious conversations. She and we, in response, drew on theological history, canon law, role of experience, individual conscience, and the sense of the faithful. Remember, this is 30,000 feet, so everything looks a little smaller. Over 150 Mercy Sisters, associates, and partners in ministry engaged in this discussion at the time of the discussion. In the second, in November 2021, Dr. Linda Hogan, professor of ecumenics in the School of Religion at Trinity College in Dublin, led a focused discussion on the claims of conscience, its relationship to magisterial teaching, and the conflicts that occasionally arise. That's her special area of expertise. The conversation was enriched by a pre-reading that was assigned to participants about several mercy experiences in the United States involving conflicts of conscience and judgments of some church officials.
So, in February of 2022, the SOGI work group decided to take a pause. And we invited the community to take a look, now that we had been through education of 2.5, almost 3 years, what were our mercy constitutions saying to us now? Our mercy constitutions is a document by which we live our lives. It contains all the precepts and rubrics that we try and attain as Sisters of Mercy. It has beautiful language, some of which you're going to see here. Through our direct service, we seek to relieve misery and to address its causes, and to support all persons who struggle for full dignity. We strive to witness to mercy when we reverence the dignity of each person. We believe that God is faithful and that our struggle to follow Christ will extend God's reign of love over human hearts. So through this contemplative process, we took a look at our documents and through the lens of our deepening understandings of the exclusion and sufferings LGBTQ persons endured in the church and society. Many present voiced the call that we needed greater integrity of these words and our deeds. And so we were challenged to think about actions that we could start to be more consonant with what we say and what we do.
So in a session coming closely after that one, in March 2022, we explored the relationship between our mercy mission and Catholic identity to surface perspectives, concrete experiences, items to consider, possibilities, desires, concerns, etc. It's important to know that religious institutes like ours are not part of the authority structure of the church. We're not part of that structure. We're part of the charismatic side of the church. Now, over history, religious women and men have had to reiterate to popes and bishops a number of different times, but it is the case. So we have a certain freedom. So we explored key points of canon law, focusing on Catholic identity and the protections and opportunities for religious institutes to engage the church leadership around advocacy and justice for the LGBTQ community. We look at historical perspectives on mercy ministry, our sponsorship, the evolution of both. The information gave us a very useful overview of our current institutional structures. And I want to say that all that material is very complicated, so I hope you won't ask us to give us evolved and so on. But anyway, that was part of the background, and we certainly needed it.
So during the same session, we decided again to take a pause, and a time of contemplative prayer and silence followed. And we had conversations in small group and then shared in large group, again about 150 persons, to share with one another what surfaced after listening about our mercy, mission, and Catholic identity. And as you can see, some of the reflections are here on the screen. Church doctrine can change over time. The focus should be on inclusion. It's our duty to raise these issues and pose the prophetic questions. Inherently disordered is violent language, and we need to do away with it. We need to expand our idea of what Catholic identity means.
So it's clear, as I said in the beginning, that our work is not finished. That's obvious. With permission, I quote our president, Sister Patricia McDermott, who spoke to those present at the March 4th session. Quote, "Our work has been and must continue to include that of education and dialogue, initiating and creating deeper relationships among all of us that reflect and demonstrate respect, healing, and reconciliation. And our work must be about systemic change within our institute and within our church." I think she would have liked the term transfiguration that marks this conference.
So countdown to chapter 2023. So it's been 6 years. Next April, we're having our 2023 chapter. And we've started engagement with the membership, again, about 2,200 members or so, about what the agenda for this next chapter is going to be, and who we would like to be for our world, and what our mission will be going into the future. And what has become evident, I'm on the chapter planning committee, and what has become evident is that the work that the SOGI work group has been doing for the last 4.5 years is bearing fruit. It's coming up as something that we need to talk about, we need to continue to do our work in. So we would like to see the continuation of this justice work and help the Mercy community make connections to our other critical concerns. Similar to what Dr. Carmona said last night, is that it's all connected. So our critical concerns around women, around nonviolence, around earth, around race, they're all connected to this as much as those other critical concerns. We're trying to help our community make those connections.
So we very much want some time for dialogue with you, so we're going to stop at this point, but we agreed that each of us would choose one final point to end with. So mine is this. Our mission is stated this way in our constitutions: to relieve misery, to address its causes, and to support all persons who struggle for full dignity. I believe we share much of this mission with all of you. So my concluding challenge is this: I believe the frontier today in the struggle for full dignity is in the arena of gender diversity, fluidity, and personally recognized identity.
And I would say that our founder is Catherine McCauley, in 1831 Dublin, Ireland, responded to an urgent need and reached out to the marginalized in her time, poor women and children, giving them education and skills to empower them and lift them out of poverty. Our call as Sisters of Mercy in this time is to respond also to an urgent need, to act in solidarity and work for justice for our LGBTQ siblings who are being discriminated against and marginalized in both church and society, and to be the face of our radically loving and inclusive God.
Thank you.